This interview has been conducted for St John Scotland, 75 Years of Making a Difference. My name is Dr Sue Morrison and the respondent is Stuart McBride. This is the 5th of November 2021 and the interview is taking place in Ardagh. Thank you very much for agreeing to be interviewed for this project. For the record, would you please confirm your name?
Captain Stuart Crawford McBride.
Thank you. And what is your age or just your year of birth?
1947.
Where were you brought up, Stuart?
Mostly in Ayrshire, Renfrewshire and eventually Glasgow.
Could you tell me a bit about that early life?
How early do you want me to go? I don't remember the birth. That's totally lost on me. But early life I was a happy child. And hopefully I've never lost that happiness. And it was my father's work made us move. And we ended up in the centre of Glasgow, in a building that was 100 foot high, where he was the Master of Works. And it was a very, very nice place to be, and ideal for a young boy who was feeling adventurous.
What did your mum do?
She kept the house. She was an at-home mum. And she relished in that. She was good. Although when I was 12, 13-year-old, she developed, she had a heart murmur. And her aortic valve was, no, the first one was the mitral valve was playing up and was giving a lot of problem. And that was replaced with a pig's valve. And after that, it was a slow recovery in those days, but she did incredibly well. I think probably on the basis that a wife and a mother is not allowed to be ill. So she recovered very quickly. And it must have been about 4 or 5 years later, she had to have the other valve, another valve replaced. And unfortunately, they gave her a Borg-Scheele metal valve. So the fun part was that if she was beside you, you would hear the tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock from the valve opening and closing. So we always referred to her as the crocodile from Peter Pan. And she found that amusing, thankfully.
What did you do after school, Stuart?
Well, I was mad keen on exercise, and when I was 9-year-old, I joined an organisation called the Brass Bounders, which was the old name for a young trainee sailor. And it was part of the Glasgow City Council schools programmes. So through that, I had a very, very deep love of sailing. Not so much deep sea, because it's pretty horrid, go up and down too much, but certainly sailing yachts. And I qualified as an instructor and went down mostly to Windermere, and then also to the Scottish Centre in Largs and to the National Sailing Centre at Cowes. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I qualified as a captain, but never used the title. And it was only when I recorded arms with a past member of the Order of St John, Sir Malcolm Ronvald Innes of Edengate, who goes through all your papers and your qualifications. And he said, "Oh, you should use the title captain." I said, "Well, I never have done." "You should use it. There's not that many of you." And I've used it ever since. But only with a sense of humour, I hope.
Thank you. Is that when you met Sheena?
I was already a qualified instructor and a master before I met her, and I saw my future ahead. I liked this lassie. She spoke plainly and she was sound and solid and pretty. And I thought, I like this. And that gave me the reason we set up a sailing section for the British Norwegian Ski Club. She was a ladies' champion. She was a very, very good skier and a good ski instructor as well. But as you'll have seen, she's quite quiet. So she was one of the group that I took sailing, and she enjoyed it. She stayed on, and one thing led to another, and eventually we decided that was the way to go. And we've been happily married ever since for 53 and a bit years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What brought you to Aberdeenshire?
A job. I was headhunted and came up to Aberdeen, and that got me into the oil industry in 1971. So I'm past my 50 years in the oil industry now, and I don't think there are that many of us with that length of service. And I have to say I've enjoyed the vast bulk of it. It's been a wonderful time. We've lived through 3 major oil price crashes, and that has been difficult. We lived through Piper Alpha, and that was very, very, very sad. And I ended up being interviewed that evening by BBC. And it went out nationally, and it was surprising. Friends I had lost touch with had saw it and managed to make contact again. But it was a horrendous thing to happen, absolutely horrendous. And hopefully a lesson that the current oil companies understand and appreciate. Because I do fear that if they let standards slip any further, I'm not saying that they have slipped, but there's a fair chance. COVID-19 has been a big problem. Programmes of maintenance have been pushed back. There's a limit how long you can do that before a major incident happens. And that is my concern. So, sorry, that's a wee bit of a depressing side, but it's the way I do look at it.
Could you tell me about your career in the oil industry?
Yes, I ended up by accident in the food sector. And having done that, I thought, well, I'd better learn to cook. So I did go and worked in quite a number of kitchens, restaurants, and got a good feeling for food and enjoyed it, and sat in my city in guilds to qualify. And that was done, and then I went even madder and went and did public health at University of Glasgow. And in fact, the day that Sheena, my loving wife, gave birth to our twins, she has never ever forgiven me, because she was feeling rather sick and unwell, and she had a little dish that she was sick into. And apparently I peered into it and said, "Oh, so that's what bile looks like. That may well come up in our examination." She had no sense of humour for that.
I wonder why. So, please carry on with your career.
Oh yes, well, we moved to Aberdeen, and I was in the food industry, and I worked for one of the nationals, and then joined a food wholesaler who specialised in the offshore industry. So that took me even deeper into it. And eventually a client said, "Do you ever think of going to work offshore?" So I said, "No, but I could." And the salary was probably about double the salary I was on, and working for 6 months a year seemed quite a good deal, although not as good as the youngsters have nowadays. But it was fine. It was good, and it allowed me to have more time with the family. So I enjoyed my time offshore, but sadly I was always fairly ambitious, and anything I took on I wanted to do it well, do it properly, and achieve as much as I was able to expand my ability. So I went offshore, loved it there, and then came onshore and was doing consulting work on the catering side. Some of the finest kitchens in and around Aberdeen I designed and was quite involved with. So it was good, it was good. But I had a 3-month stint of no business, and I was invited to go out to the Far East, to the Middle East rather, to Saudi Arabia. And I went out there for 3 months, thinking that I was quite a cute kiddie and knew how to do things, and then met my boss out there, a gentleman called Peter Ryan, and suddenly realised how little I knew. And it was the most wonderful experience. And after my 3 months was almost up, he said, well, we get on well together, so I can put another desk in my office and I will teach you anything you want to know. And we did that for 2 years. And it was the most fabulous 2 years of learning. But I was away from the wife and children, and that was not a good part. So eventually I decided, much though I loved it, it was time to get back to Aberdeen. And I therefore joined a French offshore catering company, initially as commercial director, and then ended up as managing director, and found it quite good fun. We built from nothing to become the second largest caterer in the UK at that time. So we did well, we did enjoy it, but the parent company decided to sell it off. They sold it to a Norwegian organisation, which quite understandably wanted to put a Norwegian in charge. I could understand that. So left with not a lot to do, I thought, well, what do we know? We know a bit about the French, we can speak a little bit of the language, we'll just go to keep on where we are, and we'll maybe have a go on our own. And that's what we did. And that's 31 years ago, and we've survived 31 years. We've done we've won 2 Queen's Awards for Enterprise and International Trade, one presented by the Duke of Gloucester, who of course was head of the order at that point, under Her Majesty of course, and the other was from the Princess Royal, who was the most wonderful fun. She was brilliant. So we've been lucky with that. We also did 2 garden parties at Balmoral for 3,000 to 3,500 people each time. Fabulous fun. I managed to persuade Jenny Bond of the BBC to take a little tiny fruit tartlet, it was about that size, by that high, and to eat it in a runner. And they reckoned that was going into the bloopers of the year, as she tried to eat this and ask questions at the same time. Wonderful fun. We've been very, very lucky. The sad part was that we were not able to introduce our team to Her Majesty. That had been arranged, that she would come and say hello, but one of the big television companies had arrived with a massive long arm with a camera on it, where they could actually see everything down the way. So that had to be cancelled. But it was a shame. It was a shame. Sheen and I met her anyway, because the Lord Lieutenant was, in fact, a member of the Committee of the Order of St John. So he was very determined that we would say hello, and that was wonderful. And we've done a second. We did the golden, we did the diamond garden parties. There's only been 2 in living memory at Balmoral, so it was a wonderful honour to be allowed to do that. And to this day, we get invited every year to the Gillies Ball. There's 2 are held, and we have the option of which one we go to. Normally it's the Royal Guard, Royal Household, Royal Protection Squad, the Minister, the band leader, the hairdresser, and the McBrides. So we've been wonderfully fortunate, really. And there are tales that sadly I can't tell of those happenings.
Sounds wonderful. So are you retired now?
I wish I was. No, far, far from it. We still have the offshore and remote site catering company that's still ticking away. Could be busier. Most certainly would welcome more business. Any clients that are watching, there's absolutely no experience required. We will teach you how you want things done, and we'll show you. But we also have an occupational health company, which does all forms of medicals onshore and offshore. We do drug and alcohol testing, which is quite an interesting part of the business. And we also do COVID-19 screening. And on the COVID-19, we have a special rapid test centre near the airport, near the heliports. And we're putting through somewhere in the region of 600 people a week there. So it's a fascinating business, and we hopefully are making it easier and better and safer offshore. That's the objective.
Thank you for that, Stuart. Could you tell me when you first became involved with St John Scotland?
Well, I was the second one in the family to be involved. My wife Sheena was involved first because she was very kindly helping out at the shop, which was part of the St John Hospital that we had in those days. And she was very happy, enjoyed it, and somebody must have liked her, and next thing she knew, she was invited to become a serving sister in the order. And that was a wonderful honour, just as any membership or advancement in the Order of St John is a fantastic thing to live through, to go through. It was one first class. Things have changed a wee bit since then, because you're brought into the order at normally the 24th or around the 24th of June on St John's Day, or close there too. And it's where it is different now. In those days, there were certainly far more people joining the order than there are today, but every single individual, as they were being brought forward by the ushers, a brief synopsis of why they were being admitted or why they were being advanced was said. And it just brought the whole thing, that aspect of it, to life, rather than just being brought in front and a medal pinned on and off you go. It made it very, very special. And everyone there kind of knew, oh, that person did this and that person did that. And I think it was a great thing to have, and hopefully one of these days they might consider bringing it back again. I became the secretary back in 1997 or thereabouts, because the then secretary was going to move out to New Zealand. So somebody had to have a go, and my wife very kindly said, oh, I think Stuart could do that. No, don't want that, don't need it. But then I discovered who was involved, and particularly David Patton of Granham was the local chairman, and the most amazing character. He was the first person in Scotland to take the association committee and the order committee. They had two separate functions. Association committee raised funds. The order committee spent them, and they were separate. There might be one or two members in both, but that was relatively unusual. And David decided, this is silly having two committees. Why don't people see how it's raised and how it's spent? So he stuck the two committees together, and we were the first in Scotland to do that. And I have a funny feeling he didn't tell anybody in Edinburgh initially, but however, I could be wrong on that. And I had the joy of working with him as our chairman, until sadly he developed Alzheimer's and started to slip. And we did our best to keep him going and keep him happy. And he still wanted to be involved. But once the diagnosis had been confirmed, sadly he could no longer be chairman. So we made him president, and he could still attend. We were very, very lucky with him. Cared a lot, offered up his house for committee meetings. Also we had a small garden party there. We had a gardener's question time with top quality Beech Grove Garden gardeners. It was just absolutely wonderful, but it was the generosity of David and Juliet, his wife. They were very, very kind to us regularly, and it was super.
What did your work activities with St John Scotland involve?
Well, I was secretary, so I had to do pretty well everything. We didn't. At that point, Edinburgh was a small organisation and didn't offer the support that is fantastic now. A massive difference where there is somebody who's a specialist and you can say, look, I haven't time to do this. Will you have a go at it for me? And that has worked wonderfully well. We are been very, very happy with that. And it's improving all the time. Things are progressing. I think we still are a bit chauvinistic, but that's a different issue.
Is that an issue you would like to talk about?
I can do. The order has always been fairly male-dominated. But we now have, in Scotland, we now have a prior that is a lady. That hopefully will help. I'm a great believer in having balance. In our own business, we were running with over 60% female staff versus 30-odd% male, missing out the bit in between. And it was paid exactly the same salary, but the whole place worked better. So I've always been a great believer in having that. And I keep hoping that the incorporated trades in Aberdeen, the 7 incorporated trades, will follow the example of the 14 trades in Glasgow and have ladies not only entering, but reaching the level of being deacon of the trade. So we're slowly getting there, but it's been a long, hard slog to change minds on it.
Roughly, what is the ratio of female to male volunteers in Aberdeenshire?
Volunteers, we're sitting probably about 65% male. And I think maybe that's because we're just not getting the message out far enough. Because nurses are ideal, young doctors are ideal. There are so many things that would fit nicely with what we do. And I would love to see that balance improving.
Could you tell me about some of the activities that you're involved with, including the CPR and...
Sure. We do carry out a lot. The one that people may not have heard of was that at one time there was an athlete in Aberdeen called Kenny Herriot. And Kenny he was an ex-army PE instructor. And his motorbike came to a stop and toppled over onto him. It was only moving 2-3 miles an hour. And he thought, well, that's not a problem, until he tried to move and suddenly found that he couldn't. However, nothing ventured, nothing gained. He went through his rehabilitation and realised that he wanted to do things still. So he took up wheelchair racing. And St John in Aberdeen purchased a brand new racing machine for him to compete in. And he did wonderfully well. He had to go to Denmark to get the machine made and fitted, because it had to be high quality for him to be able to compete properly. And on his 2 large wheels were the Rondel of St John. So it was absolutely magnificent. And he did quite a bit of speaking, public speaking, motivational speaking, and was brilliant. So that was a nice one for us to do. What else have we done? There is the St John Church in Aberdeen, which is part of the Smithfield Institute for the Deaf. And they had a problem with one window had to be replaced. And through Ginny Sheriffs, very active vice chairman in the committee at that time, we provided a brand new window, a St John window, for that church. And it's one of those, there's a number of things that people aren't really aware of that we've done in the past. We do go out and talk to groups about St John. And I had to do one up on the north coast here last year. And it's absolutely fascinating. It's a great experience, especially the questions and answers phase, as to what they don't quite understand. Maybe I haven't told them properly. But it was good. And we use a basic slideshow that has come out of Edinburgh from St John and adapt it slightly without taking anything away from it. So it's been good fun. The cancer and leukemia action in Aberdeen, known as CLAN, they required a vehicle, and we provided that. We also helped to provide a vehicle for the Portlethen ambulance service. It's not an ambulance as such, it's a patient transport, come whatever they need in the community. One of the major things it does is to pick up prescriptions and deliver it to people who are stuck at home and can't get out. So we help them with that. I think you've already been made aware of the Aberdeen Sitter Service, which is 25 plus years we've been supporting them. And I haven't seen much of them over the recent past. Aberdeen Mountain Rescue has for a long time been a passion of our association in Aberdeen and the order in Aberdeen. And we started with giving them garaging at the back of the St John Hospital. And from there, when we sold the hospital, which is something I could return to, they got interim premises and they had to move out of the hospital. And after 3-4 years, it must have been, we actually built the first base that St John built was in Aberdeen. And it was it was opened by the Duke of Gloucester, and everybody was just absolutely amazed because it was built to the specifications that the team required. It wasn't something that was kind of, well, here's a building, turn it into your use. No, from the ground up, it was designed to be a mountain rescue base. And from that start, then they went on to build bases throughout Scotland, as you know. And eventually, because of the legal liability, they were actually gifted to the teams, which they greatly appreciate, obviously. So that was good. The move of the mountain rescue out of the hospital premises was probably one of the greatest PR disasters that I've ever come across. To have the staff of the hospital, who knew it was owned by St John, discover from the local radio or from the Evening Express newspaper that the hospital had been sold. It was a disaster. They were in tears, they didn't know where to look, what to say. It was a terrible, terrible thing to happen. And hopefully a very, very large lesson was learned from that. Even the local association committee had no idea. They were kept totally out of it. So it did not go down well. And with the loss of the hospital, they sold it to the general manager, who in turn within 2 years sold it on for double the price. However, the money that came in from the hospital, we believe, was the start of the real money in St John in Scotland. We think that is the nucleus that has been built on. So it served a very, very good purpose. We were told that we could get another charity shop since we lost the one at the hospital. However, proposals were sent to Edinburgh by Marjorie Donaldson, who was the then chairman of the association, and nothing came of them. So, to the people of Aberdeen, St John didn't exist. And it's been a bit of an uphill struggle ever since. But we'll get there. We will get there. We had two of our committee members came up with us, they're both school teachers, came up with a wonderful project whereby youngsters could go through a module on St John and then do a question and answer session at the end. And it was remarkable because they understand the history as we see it of St John and also where St John currently is. And hopefully that's going to raise kids who know and are interested in St John. So that's really where our future has to lie. The CPR training has been used in two hospitals, in two schools, very successfully. And in one of them, we actually have the more senior pupils trained to teach. So it is self-perpetuating within the school. As the youngsters come up, they learn that and go down. It's a form that I saw in Singapore, where they spend their intention, declared intention, is to train that every household in Singapore will have one first aider in it. And they're well on the way to doing that. Absolutely magnificent. Rows of resuscitation nannies, and outside all the shoes are lying in the corridor because they won't take them into the classroom. And they're learning and they're passing information on, and they're alive and vibrant with the wish to be good at first aid. So we're going in that same direction now, I think. Singapore is a fascinating country, and it has been a great privilege to have met and been allowed to work with the members of the order there. Although we have also met with members of the order in Australia, and when we were in Hobart in Tasmania, we were introduced to a gentleman that we eventually discovered was the head of the Order of St John in Hobart. And the next day he took us to see the premises and the ambulances that they ran in Hobart. Great advert for the order and wonderful people to spend time with. We were very, very fortunate to be allowed to do that. I think that it is unlikely that people will remember that there was a St John Musical Society, which was centred at Haddo, on the outskirts of Aberdeen, where the Marchioness of Aberdeen, June Gordon, held sway and was on top of everything musically and that happened. It's a cultural centre that she had, and did wonderful work for the order and for music generally. One of her proteges was Prince Edward, and he was a regular attender and thespian in the making. So yeah, that was quite good fun. We were lucky in Aberdeen that we were able to be involved in the 50th anniversary, and we did have a slight problem that one of the local ministers, whose church we wished to use because of its ancient link to the original order, decided that no, he didn't want us there. He misread what our organisation was about. However, when he eventually understood, having been sent more and more information, he was suddenly desperate to help, and particularly to join the order. Very sadly at that point, we had already made alternative arrangements and had to decline his very kind offer. Braemar Mountain Rescue. Well, we have focused very much on Aberdeen Mountain Rescue and have a representative from them on our committee. We also have within our area the Braemar Mountain Rescue Team, which is linked to the police. And they were in need of another vehicle and therefore the order very kindly agreed to provide it. And we were lucky to be able to go out to Balmoral Castle, to park on the lawn, which is sacrosanct, and then to pass the keys to Prince Philip. It was a fantastic outing. And we had Ken, who was the chairman from Perth at that time, came up. And I've met Philip a number of times, and he very kindly said, "Oh, hello, Stuart, how are you? And how are you getting on? How's business?" So I explained that we were surviving and that business was okay. And next to me was Ken, and Prince Philip turned to Ken and said, "Oh, what do you do?" And Ken had just finishing restoring his castle. So he turned round and he said, "I restore castles, sir." Philip looked at him, looked at Balmoral, looked at him again and looked at Balmoral, and then said, "That could be very useful." I would never have had these experiences but for the Order of St. John. We've been so lucky, so fortunate in our lives, and one part of the good fortune was becoming involved with the Order. It is unique. It is remarkable. It has been and is in need of change, which will be driven not from us here in Aberdeen, but from those who now hopefully understand what is required and that this will take place.
Thank you. Is there anything you would like to add, Stuart?
Well, I think we've had some fascinating fundraising events, which maybe other areas might consider taking on. We've had Beating the Retreat with pipe bands, which have between normally 2 pipe bands, and the ATC, the Army Training Corps, have been very good in providing one. And in Aberdeen, the Robert Gordon School has another. They have their own school band. And seeing the two put together and playing the traditional end of day has been wonderful. It's been very, very good. And we tie that up with an example of Highland dancing in the hall, which is adjacent to the exterior. That has been fun, that has been good. And it's a kind of different event where people will come, and I would always say that the money that is extracted painlessly, and they very happily give up and help us. But we have not been able to do that, obviously, for a few years, but we do hope that we'll get a chance to do it again in the not too distant future. We did the traditional coffee mornings, book sales, picture sales, but we discovered that the amount of input required from the committee to make a relatively small sum wasn't worth it. You could only say the only value in doing it was that you were able to spread the name a little bit. But there must be better ways of spreading the name. And you tend to be speaking to the same people that you spoke to last year and the year before. So it's not, I don't think, the best of things to do. We have 9 lessons in carols, which we've been doing for a few years. And that's been very popular, really popular. I know that everybody nowadays is trying to be politically correct, but I don't see why Christianity should come into that. And we were a Christian order. We don't have to stay as a Christian order, but that should still be part of the ethos of it. And I am very comfortable with other faiths. I have no problem. with them being involved or helping or us helping them. I think that's perfectly fair and the way life should be for the future. But it should never be with somebody saying, you cannot be Christian, you cannot mention Christ. That is wrong. Apart from that, yes, we've had fun.
What do you see as the main challenges for St John Scotland going forward?
The name isn't out there as much as it used to be. When we get heavily involved in mountain rescue, I am sure that part of that idea was that it could bring in a number of young members who are in the teams, that they would join the order and would help the order. I do not, or certainly in this area, where we have a good relationship with the team, we have not seen that happen to any great extent. They are dedicated to the mountain rescue role, and that is what they do. So it has not given us the result that I believe we entered, part of the reason we entered into it. So the problem is still youth. How can we get them involved? And I still firmly believe that by getting young people involved in CPR and first aid training at an early age, then we can bring them through and bring them in.
Do you think there should be a lower age for the introduction of members?
I think it does no harm. I mean, we still have the squire role is there, but that's only a squire to a knight, and that's only one. So that's not an answer to it. But there can be a junior organisation set up, and especially now with the St Andrews not ruling the roost, as one could say, in Aberdeen or in the whole of Scotland, where their position is not what it was prior to the agreement ending. We could look to boost that side of it and bring the kids up, bring them into a separate organisation, effectively as they do in Singapore. To be honest, I'd say that's the model I enjoyed and thought was good to emulate. But all I can do is recommend that anybody going out in that direction is encouraged to, particularly if they're at a senior level, to make contact with the order there and go and see what they're doing and how they're doing it. And then think, can we do it here? It's certainly good for the youngsters who become involved because they learn so much from the process. And I would love to see that.
Do you think it would be worthwhile putting on some events for youngsters to come along to, some kind of, I'm thinking of more youth-led or youth-participated activities, dances, whatever they're interested in, walking out on the hills type activities, to bring the children in, and then you could talk to them about St John Scotland, as well as in schools?
That could be. I'm no expert on that front, particularly with regard to the risks involved in anything to do with youngsters. You do need to be cleared to be able to be with them, and that's a good thing. I'm still all in favour of that. But I don't have a deep enough depth of knowledge of young people to know what would appeal to them. But we have some younger members, and our own Vice Chairman in Aberdeen, Mike Will, and our Treasurer, Paul Rory, are both school teachers in good contact with youngsters. And I would speak to them first and follow their guidance.
What are your hopes for the future of St John Scotland?
To continue to evolve the way that it's been happening, perhaps speed it up a little bit, I believe and hope that our new prior will have a completely new set of eyes and will have her own ideas of how and where we should go. And if she wishes to have change, I will totally support it. If she says, no, we'll have to stay as we are, I will still support it. But I will be disappointed.
That's all of my questions, Stuart. Is there anything you would like to add?
No, I think I've probably battered your ears hard enough as it is.
Not at all. It's been fascinating. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.